Hello and welcome to this very special part of the Bob and Pals puppy class. I'm your instructor Rach, both online and in person, and I cannot wait to get cracking with you guys and work on some amazing skills with these pups. So, throughout the duration of this course, we're going to be looking at building calm, confident and focused pups. Pups that are going to grow up to be dogs that we absolutely love hanging out with. So we're going to work on some really fabulous skills together, and we're going to look at developing those skills as the weeks go on. The beginning bit, this online bit that you're getting, is really a big collection of information, because if we're looking to help our dogs learn things, what we need to do is have an understanding of how dogs learn, because then we can be really clever about the influence that we're having on the decisions that they're making. So this online section, it's cut down into a few sections. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk through how dogs learn, how we can use things to our advantage. And then afterwards, what we're going to look at as well is there's another section of this video where we're going to look at the concept of a bucket. We're going to talk through how our dogs' buckets can get full and what we can do to empty them, because it can cause us a problem when they get a little bit full. We're also going to finish off with a little bit of homework. So not only are you getting information right now, you're going to start the process of learning and understanding your puppy right from now. You're also going to get points that you can action that are going to have a huge impact on how your puppy is at home right away. So right this week, you're going to see some amazing changes before we've even met each other and started doing the classes together. So buckle up, grab yourself a brew or a gin and tonic or a beer, I'm not fussy. Get yourself all settled and we shall talk about how dogs learn and what we can do to influence that. So in this section, we're going to talk about how dogs learn by association. So there's lots of things that our dogs learn to associate with objects, places, people, all sorts of wonderful things. And when we're looking at this from a science point of view, this is called classical conditioning. So if you've ever heard of Pavlov's dogs, that's exactly what we're looking at here. This kind of association between something that initially meant nothing to the dog and then them figuring out that that means that this thing is about to happen. And it's a really, really cool thing. So, for example, puppies come into our lives and they have absolutely no idea what a lead means. It's just a piece of fabric. It's just this object that exists. But over time, as we start taking them out more, as we start taking them to places that they figure out that they love going to the park, they love going to the woods with you, they love going out and exploring the world, they soon cotton on that when you pick up that lead, they're going out. So all of a sudden that lead, they now associate with going out to wonderful places. And what we see is behavior change that happens because you just walk over to the cupboard or you walk over to the rack or wherever it is that you keep your leads, you pick it up and your dog starts going mad because they're like, brilliant, they've got the lead, we're going out to play. Fantastic. Your dog has associated the lead with really, really good stuff. Okay, they can do the same thing with people as well. So for example, people inherently are people. They don't mean anything when they're little, they're just people. And they mostly bring good stuff. But what you find very quickly is our dogs really like some people and they don't like others quite as much. So for example, my dog Bob has figured out that my mum is a brilliant person to love, right? So we call her Auntie Cheryl. Apparently she's not old enough to have kids. So she's not grandma, she's Auntie Cheryl. And if I say, shall we go see Auntie Cheryl? He's like, brilliant, yes, because he's absolutely associated coming to this house with getting smoked salmon and cream cheese and all of the wonderful things that he gets given here because he gets spoiled. He knows that Auntie Cheryl means great stuff. He's made the association there and he's figured it out and he starts going mad. Unfortunately, it does mean that they can associate things with negative experiences. So, for example, we often do crate training when puppies are little, don't we? Because it's a really sensible place for us to put them to keep them safe. Now, when they hit their troublesome times, sometimes what happens is we pop them in there to get them out of the way, and it's a bit of a rubbish punishment for them because they don't understand necessarily what happened. And what they start to do is associate that crate with being separated from us and with being put away and it not being a nice place. So when we do crate training, we're very careful about building a positive association with that crate, that when you're in here, it's great, you're cool, everything is grand in here. You get toys, you get food, you get water, you get also, it's great. It's a great place to be. I want you to associate your crate with good stuff, not the bad stuff. So it's when we're looking at training using association, it is a little bit less obvious because we tend to train using consequences, which we're going to move on to. But it is absolutely possible for us to be clever and say, I want my dog to associate the crate with being a nice, happy, calm place. And once we've made that decision, now we can start doing something about that. So we say, okay, yeah, Rach, that sounds like something I'd like. I'd like my dog to think their crate is a nice, calm, happy place. And I say, okay, how are you going to show them that that's the case? How are you going to help them be calm in that crate? So as soon as we start having these conversations, we can start making some really cool decisions. So I might choose to pop my puppy in their crate and give them a Kong at the same time, or a yak chew, or an antler, or something that they can be on with where they're laying down, they're being chilled, and they're being calm. Another really cool thing that we can do, and this is a lovely one in the Steve Mann Easy Peasy Puppy Squeezy book. I am a big fan of getting information from quite a lot of places because sometimes somebody will say something and you're like, I hadn't thought of it like that. And it's really, really interesting when you go to multiple places for your stuff. So Steve in his Easy Peasy Puppy Squeezy, he talks about a crate magician that appears. So what that means is when your dog is nowhere near their crate, when they're off doing their other thing, what you're going to do is grab a little bit of food and you're just going to sprinkle it in the crate and you're going to walk away, right? And then what happens is at some point, your puppy goes in the crate and goes, oh, there's food in here. Cool. And they eat the food and they go, that was great, wasn't it? That was a good find. And then they come out of the crate and they get on with their life. And then they're off over there and you go, brilliant, I'm just going to put a bit more food in there. So you go back and you put a little bit more food in and you can use their kibble for this. Take it out of their daily allowance, absolutely. Pop some kibble in there and wait for them to come back. And then they find it again and they think, there's something cool happening here. Every time I go in there, there's food. And so what they start doing is associating that crate with good stuff happening. Brilliant. Well, we're on to a winner here, aren't we? So association, it's really clever and it's a very powerful way of us teaching our dogs that stuff means great things are going to happen. So there we go. Classical conditioning, learning by association. Okay, so the other way that dogs learn is through consequence, okay? And this one's a little bit easier to explain because this is how we mostly start teaching our dogs, and we mostly do this kind of automatically, okay? So dogs learn through consequence. They do something and something else happens as a result. So, for example, I suspect that you've already got a puppy or a dog, and one of the first things that you did was you taught it to sit, okay? And what happened was we asked our dog to sit, or we popped a treat on their nose and we lifted it up so that they followed and their bottom hit the floor. And then what we did, as soon as their bottom hit the floor, we were like, yeah, you did it, well done. And we reached in, we gave them a treat and we congratulated them, didn't we? We do the same thing with toilet training. When they go outside on the grass, they do a wee on the grass and we go, yeah, you're such a clever person, you're such a clever puppy, wow. And we go and we get the treats for them. And your dog sits there and goes, I weed outside, they threw a party. Cool, that's interesting. And then the next time they go outside and we outside, we throw another party and they go, they did it again. That's interesting. Okay. And then they go out and they wee again on the grass and we throw another party and they go, there's a pattern here. They do this every time I wee out here, but they don't seem to do it when I wee inside. I tell you what, I quite like it when they do that, so I'm going to try and wee out here more often. They've learned that weeing outside has a great consequence. They like it when you go mad. And remember at the beginning, dogs do things they like. If they like it when you throw a party and give them a yummy for having a wee outside, they're going to do more of it. Dogs do things they like. They're going to go, hey, I need a wee, and I also want you to throw a party. Can you take me outside now, please? And they come to you and they find you, or they go and they howl near the door, or they do something to signify, I need a wee, and I really want to do it out there because I want you to throw the party as well. Absolutely, that is learning by consequence. So, consequences, let's dig into the science of this. This is what we call operant conditioning when we're looking at science, okay? So there's things that we can add as a consequence to behaviour that are good and that are bad. We can also take things away that are good and that are bad to affect behaviour. And this is where we start talking, and it can get a little bit complicated. I'll be honest with you, every time I go on a training course that's designed for trainers, there's always a lot of discussion around this point because it is quite intense. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify it because I think it's important for you to understand it as an owner so that you can make some great decisions about how you want to train your dog. So you're going to have to bear with me because I'm going to be drawing on a nice clipboard here. If you're reading stuff and you're looking stuff up on the internet and you come across somebody talking about the quadrants of learning, that's what we're going to be talking about here. So I've drawn 4 quadrants here, okay? So our dog does something and we're going to provide a consequence. They wee on the grass, we throw a party. They sit on the floor, we give them a treat, okay? That is adding something that they like, and what we're hoping is we're going to see more of the behaviour occurring. So let me write that down. Adding things they like, and that increases the behaviour. Okay, you see, we add things that they like, they increase the behaviour. They sit down, we give them yummy, they do more sitting because dogs do things they like and they go, cool, I quite like that, okay? We could take away something that they're after and hope that they do that behaviour less. So this is an interesting one. We can take away things they like, and hopefully we'll see less of that behaviour. Okay, so an example there would be, if my dog is jumping all over me, what they're really trying to do is get my attention, aren't they? They would quite like it if I bent down and I went, oh, you're such a clever little boy, hello. And I said hello to them, I look at them and I usually rub them and touch them. That's what they're after, isn't it? But if they're jumping on me and I say, oh, actually, I don't really want to do that, because that would be adding something that they liked. And that would mean that the behaviour is going to see more of it. I'm going to get more of the jumping behaviour. Well, I don't like the sound of that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take away the thing that they're after. Now, I don't have to be extreme about this and walk away. All I need to do, if the puppy's jumping all over me or your adult dog is jumping all over you, just turn away and don't talk to them. I'm taking my head away from you, I'm not talking to you, and I'm probably even going to take my hands away from you as well, because we've all got those dogs, haven't we? They're clever enough to put their own head underneath your hand, aren't they? Just clever at that. So I've taken away the thing that they wanted, and they don't get access to that, and I'm likely to see that they do less jumping, because the jumping, what they figure out is, jumping doesn't get me the thing that I wanted. And they've got to figure out a different way to get the thing they wanted. So a great idea is, if they're jumping, you take away the stuff that they don't want, that you don't want them to have. Eye contact, physical contact, verbal contact, it's gone. And the moment that they put their paws on the floor, which is the thing that you like, isn't it? You give them what they wanted in the first place. So you bend down and you say, oh, you're such a clever boy, well done. And you give them the thing they wanted, so you're likely to see more of that behaviour. Well, that behaviour is paws on the floor. I like this combination of stuff that's going on here. I'm going to take away the thing that they're doing. They're doing the jumping, I take away the thing. They do the thing I want, I give them the thing they want. That's a great transactional value, isn't it? That's essentially what dog training is. When we're training our dogs, what we're saying is, I've got something that's of value to you, and I'm happy to give you it if you do something that's of value to me. To me, value is paws on the floor. To you, value is attention. As soon as you do that, I'll give you what you want. That's great, isn't it? Okay, we could add things they don't like. Oh, my pen's running out. That's really poor form, isn't it? And by adding things they don't like, what we're hoping to see is a reduction in that behaviour. So remember right at the beginning, dogs do things they like, they don't do things they don't like. Okay, now this is how we've traditionally trained dogs, because it's effective. And I'm not here to say that it's not effective at all. It's not my way of doing things, but it certainly is effective, okay? So for example, dogs, if they were pulling on a lead, traditionally, something that a trainer might want to do is to do a lead jerk, so to pull on the lead quite sharp, and it gives a little tug on the collar. And the dog doesn't like that, so what they do is they stop pulling, okay? That's how that works. And it works, okay? Now for me, the reason I don't like to use this sort of training is because there's always a fallout. So for example, we've all got people in our lives that we quite like, but every now and again, they just do stuff that we're not particularly keen on. Or, maybe I think of people, and I know it's a really horrible thing to say, but we all know them, people who have got two sides to them. So they're lovely to your face, but you know full well they're not so polite behind your back. Those people you're reserved around, you are careful with, because you hold back, I guess, a little bit of yourself because you're not completely and utterly comfortable with them. And the same is true of our relationships with our dogs. If they spend their lives going, well, most of the time you're all right, but every now and again you do something that really scares me and I don't like it, they're never going to be fully committed to our relationship. And the problem with that then is we don't get the best out of them. We don't have this wonderful relationship where it's easy, because there's always a little barrier there. There's always this reluctance from them. There's always this kind of back of their mind worry. And for me, that's not ideal. Added into the fact that for me as a human, my choice in life is I like to treat people and animals kind of, I say how I would like to be treated, but I appreciate that we all need treating differently, don't we? But with respect and without injuring them. I don't really want to scare people. I don't really want to scare dogs or any animal. I don't really want to hurt them. So for me, considering that I know that this, adding stuff that they like, is incredibly effective. It's not only effective, it's longer lasting. And what I see is dogs are willing and happy and excited to perform these behaviours rather than just avoiding stuff. They're actually actively excited and willing to do it. So for me, this is not only more effective, it makes me feel better, and it's just overall a nicer way of doing things. So I don't use that quadrant. I don't ever add things that they don't like as a consequence to their behaviour. So I'm just going to cross that off. So you're not going to see any of that in our training, okay? The last one is to take away something. Take away things they don't like. And what you're hoping to see here is an increase in behaviour. So what happens is something bad was happening, they do a behaviour, and the consequence is the bad thing stops, okay? Now that might sound really nasty, because kind of how did the bad thing get there in the first place? You ask, like who gave them the bad thing? Where did that come from? And this is a really interesting quadrant. This is the one that everybody argues about when I go on training courses. So to simplify it for you, a really lovely example of this is, let's say you live in a really busy household and you've got kids running everywhere and it's loud and it's chaotic, and your dog is really tired and they're thinking, oh goodness me, I could just do with a bit of peace and quiet. I don't really like being in the middle of all this fuss, in the middle of all this kind of like woo that's going on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my crate in the corner. And when they go over to their crate in the corner and they snuggle in, it starts to go quieter. It's not as noisy. They're not in the middle of this hubbub of stuff that's going on. It's calmer and it's quieter over there. They've essentially taken away the thing that they didn't like, the hustle and the bustle, and they've done that by doing a behaviour. So what happens is they start doing that more. They go, oh, that worked. Going to my crate worked. It was, yeah, God, it got me away from all of that. I'm going to do that more, okay? So this is one of the reasons why having really strict rules about crates, particularly with children, is very, very important. That crate can become our dog's safe space so that they can help themselves out when they're around stuff that they're not particularly keen on, Perhaps they're not great with new guests coming around. They find that quite intimidating. If they've got somewhere safe that they can go to get rid of the thing that they think is worrying, then that's great for them, isn't it? So rules around crates. Kids don't get to go in crates. Kids don't get to go near crates. That's not part of what kids do. When the dog's in the crate, you leave them well alone. That's great, okay? Stuff that you will see that's less obvious are things like the halty head collars. So we all see these head collars on dogs where we pop them over the muzzle and they go around the back of the neck. The lead attaches here and then we walk along. And these are designed to help stop pulling. Okay. Now the way that things like this work, or indeed stop pulling harnesses that tighten up around our dogs, is when our dogs are at the end of their lead, the object is applying pressure to them. It's either applying pressure across their nose or across their chest or somewhere. And it's uncomfortable. It's not a pleasant experience that they're having there with the end of their lead. So what they do is they go, oh, I don't really like this. And they back up a little bit, okay? And when they back up, that removes the pressure from their nose, or it removes the pressure from their chest when they walk slightly better here. Better is a subjective term, of course. So when they walk back here, the pressure is removed. That's taken away the thing that they didn't like. So they're more likely to walk here next time this object is on. Does that make sense? So they work. Things like this work. The tools do work. But the problem with them is they only work when they're being used. So the halty head collar only works when the halty head collar is on. The stop pull harness only works when the stop pull harness is on. And if you go out somewhere and you forget it, or goodness me, I don't know, it breaks, you're back to square one because you've not actually trained the dog to do something. You've not trained them to make a different choice. You've just trained them when this object is on to avoid the uncomfort. You back away from it, essentially. So for me, this quadrant is the best one to be working in as much as I possibly can do, because what it's saying is you did a behaviour that I like, good things happen. And it builds into this, dogs do things they like, they don't do things they don't like. I want to make sure that they like doing things that I wanted them to do in the first place. So have a little think about the things that you would like your dog to do. Maybe sit and think about what you'd like them to be when they're a grown-up dog, when they're 10 or 12 years old. What do you want this dog to look like? Even shorter term, when they're 3, 4, 5, what do you want this dog to do? Do you want them to walk on a loose lead? Do you want them to recall to you? Do you want to be able to take them to the woods and let them off their lead and not really worry about where they are? If the answer to those things is yes, now you need to think about, okay, how am I going to make it so that they like doing those things? What's in it for them? How can I make sure that they make a choice and the consequence of that choice is something that they like? Yeah? So we're going to do a lot of this in the upcoming weeks, absolutely. But you can already start thinking about the things in your household that you want your dog to do, and you can start thinking about how you can get them to like doing the thing that you wanted them to do in the first place. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about our dog's bucket. Now, you might think it odd for me to suggest that your dog has a bucket, but it's essentially a lovely metaphor that we can use to discuss a collection of hormones that our dogs have got in their body. And it's really helpful for us when they start acting out and struggling with things that are happening, if they've maybe had a build-up of stress, and we start seeing the consequences of that. And it's a really nice way of thinking, oh, their buckets are full. Okay, so we're going to have a little look at some science and how that impacts our dogs, the decisions that they're making, and the way that they're experiencing the world. Okay, so what you need to know is that we have in our body 2 kinds of nervous systems, okay? We've got the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. Now, this is going to be, this video, a great big simplification of those things, just to help us get our heads around the concept really easily. So if you happen to be big into your science and you know all these things and you happen to have a medical background, then please don't get offended when I make this incredibly simple just for the sake of discussion. Okay, so you don't need to remember the names of these nervous systems. What you do need to know is that they can only be one of them on at once. We can't have them both on at the same time. You either have the parasympathetic nervous system switched on or the sympathetic nervous system switched on. Now, the parasympathetic nervous system, it's great. That one's switched on when we're resting and when we're relaxing, when we're chilling out and not doing very much, and when we're sleeping, okay? And this is a great system to have on. It's really, really beneficial. The other system that we have, the sympathetic nervous system, this one is on when we're active and we're doing things. And it's particularly switched on when we kick into our fight or flight response. It's a big activation of the sympathetic nervous system, okay? So when this one's on, we've got 2 hormones in particular. There's quite a lot of hormones that get released, but we're focusing on 2 in particular: adrenaline and cortisol. Now they're released when this is on. When it's switched off and our other nervous system is switched on, this is helping drain those things that got released when they're on. So they work in tandem with each other. When one's on, the other's off, and then they help each other out, okay? So the two hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, let's look at adrenaline first. Adrenaline is a very helpful hormone that comes around our body, and what it does is it allows us to move. So when people are nervous, if you've ever gone on stage and performed anything, you get kind of like a nervy energy before you go on, and that's your nerves that are kicking in. It's the reason that you're jiggly is you've got a load of adrenaline running through your body, and adrenaline needs to be used in movement for it to go out of our body. So we get quite jittery, and if you see me presenting in real life, you know that I am a much more movie person, because when I'm in front of people, I do have nerves. I do stand there and think, oh, I'm on the spot here, and I tend to be quite a jiggly person. And it's a little easier when I'm filming by myself in a room like this. I can stay still, which is much more helpful for videos. Okay. What we know about adrenaline is it comes in and it's very fast acting. It's gone within a few minutes, okay? It doesn't linger, it doesn't hang around, okay? And really simply, if your dog is moving, there is adrenaline going around its body, okay? So if your dog is running around a field, adrenaline there, okay? If your dog is, let's say they're a nervous dog and they're worried by things, then if they're lunging and barking at something, there's adrenaline going through their body right there, okay? So anytime your dog is moving and doing things, there's adrenaline. The more movement there is, the more adrenaline there is, because of the connection between the two. We need more adrenaline to do bigger movements, okay? Really simple way of looking at it. We like adrenaline. It's good. It's helpful. It's what allows us that fight or flight response. We can either run or fight because we have adrenaline, okay? Now, when adrenaline's released, another hormone that's released is cortisol. Cortisol's pretty good, right? Its job in general is to protect our body from stress. Really helpful, very helpful thing to go in. Unfortunately, cortisol doesn't go away quite as quickly, okay? It hangs around in our body for a lot longer than adrenaline does. If adrenaline's there for a few minutes, cortisol is there for a few days. So it takes somewhere between 2 and 3 days for the cortisol that was released then to go out of our system. So, for example, our reactive dog that was worried by something, it lunged and barked at something, it released adrenaline, it also released cortisol with that. That cortisol stays in their bloodstream for 3 days before it's gone out of their bloodstream, okay? And that's what we suggest is collecting in the bucket here. The cortisol is collecting in the bucket, okay? So inherently not such a bad thing, because when it comes in, it's to protect our body from stress. Unfortunately though, when we have a build-up of cortisol, we can then see side effects of that. And what happens is, one of the first things that happens when we've got too much cortisol flying around our bloodstream is that actually we've got a reduced ability to deal with stressful things. So this is how we say our bucket is full. We've got less coping ability. We've got less space to deal with stressful things that are happening to us, okay? We can't cope quite so well. So what we start seeing, very scientifically speaking, is stupid dogs or unpredictable dogs. If you ever have a moment where you think, what on earth are you doing? They've probably got a very full bucket, okay? The other thing that happens when we've got a build-up of cortisol over a long period of time is we can start seeing physical changes. So if you happen to know a colleague or somebody that's gone off from work with long-term stress, long-term mental health problems that they are struggling with, what we tend to see is that people are struggling with long-term stress, chronic stress. They have, their skin tone is affected, they are incredibly tired, but they might not be able to sleep, so it has an effect on our sleeping patterns. Perhaps they've put on more weight than is usual for them. Perhaps they're struggling with their energy levels, perhaps they're struggling with their temperament. You know, they're finding things more annoying than they would do recently or normally for them. And also what we know, and we know this through dogs as well, is that there is a higher related incidence of hypothyroidism. So there used to be some thinking that hypothyroidism results in reactive dogs because there's this great connection. But now what we actually think is this overabundance of cortisol is leading to hypothyroidism. So long term, over a long period of time, an increased amount of cortisol in our bodies or in our dogs' bodies is not a good thing. It's not helpful, it's not beneficial, it's no longer protecting us from stress. In fact, it's adding to our problems. So it's not really something that we want to have. And particularly with worried dogs, this is a situation that we can find ourselves in quite a lot. Okay, so let's have a little look then about what causes things to go into our bucket, what causes the release of adrenaline and cortisol. Okay, so I've got my little bucket here, and this is free to download. There's a download link here in this section as well. You can download this and you can have a little look at it yourself, and I suggest you do because it's quite a helpful thing, right? So here's our bucket. Metaphorically speaking, this is the cortisol, the collection of cortisol that's in our dogs' bodies. So I said to you that cortisol gets released anytime we switch on this sympathetic nervous system, when we're doing things, when things are happening that are kicking us off and getting us to do things. So things that are stressful, frustrating, worrying, that cause fear, all of these things pay into the bucket. So quite a lot of dogs find the delivery people coming to the door quite a worrying situation. They bark and they run around and they find that quite stressful because in the dog's world, they were existing in the house and all of a sudden a noise happened, and that was very surprising. So when that happens, and we like to draw a little line in our bucket and say, oh, there we go, that was a little dump of cortisol that went in our bucket there, okay? Somebody came to the door, as a dump of cortisol. If we have a worried or reactive dog, that could be literally anything. It could be the fact that they saw a dog in the park today, oh my goodness. Or perhaps it was a jogger that went past them really fast, and that was quite worrying, that was quite concerning. Maybe they're particularly fearful around traffic, and I don't know, a van came past them, okay? And that was very worrying. I taught a class once and I really enjoyed this. Somebody took a dog who has a lot of worried things, and they took them somewhere very quiet, very lovely. They were walking around the woods, but there was a carved out reindeer in there, and this poor dog was completely befuddled by this reindeer and found it an incredibly stressful experience. So that absolutely paid into that dog's bucket. A very stressful thing, seeing a reindeer in the woods, okay? Very, very stressful. So all these negative things here, stressful, fearful, worrying things, they pay into our bucket, and that's not great, is it? Now, puppies and young dogs very rarely have big stressful events, but they might do. But certainly as our dogs get older, if we notice that we've got a nervous dog or a worried dog, or sometimes termed reactive dogs, this is a kind of a normal part of their life, unfortunately. And every time that something happens, it pays into the bucket. So I want you to just have a little think about your dog's day, yesterday or today, and think, how many times did they come across something that worried them? And, draw it in their bucket maybe. Just draw it in and say, well, there was that time, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, okay? So you can start getting a picture of how many times cortisol has been released into their body, okay? Other stuff then that comes into our bucket, here is excitement, okay? Now, excitement's a really interesting one because these were all negative, weren't they? But excitement's good, and we think excitement is great, and we want our dogs to have a great life, and we want them to be exciting. But what we need to account for is that even though it's a good thing, it still releases the same hormones. So it still has the same impact in this bucket, okay? So when our dogs are running around and when they're having a great old time, we know that there's adrenaline release because we can see them running, right? And you know as well, because I've said to you, every time adrenaline's released, cortisol is also released. We know, therefore, that the dog running around the field chasing a ball is releasing both adrenaline and cortisol, okay? So there's a great example. If you happen to go to the field with your dog and chase a ball, that's a big old dump of cortisol, isn't it? Because the big old dump of adrenaline. And I don't know, you do it a few times and then you go for a little sniff around and then you do it a little bit more. So that's, another little load. And perhaps you do that twice a day. So you can see now how quickly this bucket is starting to fill up, can't you? Goodness me. Okay, so we want to do things that our dogs enjoy. For sure we do. We want to do exciting things. But if we've got a worried dog or a stressful dog or a dog that has just had a really busy few days, maybe instead of playing ball with them, we could do something a little bit more low-key. Perhaps we could go sniffing for food in the grass, or we could search for our favourite toy instead of chasing after our favourite toy, because they're still using their energy, they're still having a lovely time, but there's less adrenaline and cortisol getting released with those activities than if we're doing running up and down, slogging away with that ball, okay? Other things then that pay in are physical things. So Cortisol is absolutely 100% released every time our body is suffering from something, okay? Because it's coming through, and cortisol's job basically is to walk around going, I'm here, it's cool, I'm okay, we're all right, I'm here to help, right? So if your dog is in pain, if they've got a chronic health condition, let's say, so Bob, for example, he has chronic arthritis in his front right shoulder. He also has arthritis in his front left shoulder and both of his front elbows. He's 7 now, and that's something that he really struggles with. So he has a constant dripping in of cortisol, okay? So that means that every single day, before we've even done something, cortisol has gone into his body because it's protecting him from the stress and the pain of his shoulder, okay, that's going on in there. And that's a chronic long-term health condition. Lots of our dogs are perfectly healthy, but they do silly things every now and again, don't they? For example, I don't know, maybe they cut their pad on some glass that's in the woods, or perhaps they break a nail. So every time our dog stands and puts pressure on their nail, they get a dump of cortisol going through because that was painful and that wasn't very nice. Their cortisol gets released because they're in pain. What about these young dogs that then go for neutering? You know, there's no two ways about it. They've had an operation, they've had surgery. That's painful, that's uncomfortable. And absolutely that results in buckets going in. And you can see now, goodness me, this bucket is looking incredibly full right now, okay? If our dog has conditions like skin conditions, allergies, they could, goodness me, anything could be wrong, couldn't it? But essentially anything that is wrong is causing cortisol to enter into our bloodstream, okay? And the last one is tummy problems, and these are very easily overlooked. So if you think about how long our dog's gastrointestinal system is, right from its nose right down to its bottom, we've got all of the bits that lead down, and then the stomach, and then the intestines, and all of this. If you go in the garden one day and you think, oh goodness me, your poo's not very good today, that's no good, is it? It's very easy to just brush that off. But actually, if we think that then a big portion of our body is considered not well, and it will have released some cortisol to try and help with that. So there'll be a little bit of inflammation. Even if it's just something that they ate and they have a dodgy tummy after that, then absolutely there's been cortisol released as a consequence of that, okay? So for me, this is one of the main questions that I ask on a private consultation. People are always very surprised when I ask them to talk about their dog's stools. But it's very, very important for me to understand, does this dog consistently have tummy problems? Because if it does, that means it's consistently having stress going into its cortisol, going into its bucket. And that's not something that I want long term for these dogs. So if your dog has problems with its tummy, I want you to look at finding other foods that don't cause problems with their tummy. And if you know, say, I don't know, you train with cheese and you know that after they've had cheese, they get tummy upsets. Well, most dogs are lactose intolerant, so train with cheese because they love it, but buy the lactose-free cheese from the free from section at the shops instead. So they still get the great reward, but you don't have the tummy problems and the horrible stuff to pick up afterwards. So small changes can make huge differences here, okay? So what happens when there's too much in the bucket? So you can see we filled up the bucket here very easily, haven't we? So let's say we're here and this is the day that we've discussed, and then all of a sudden a firework goes off and it scares our dog. So what happens is it comes down and it overflows the bucket like this, okay? Scientifically speaking, we get a stupid dog. That's not really scientifically speaking. It's just a nice way of thinking about it, okay? Now, unfortunately, we are now in a catch-22 situation. For example, we've got a nervous and reactive dog. They've had all of these things occur to them and then the bucket overflowed. And now what happens is they can't cope with stuff anymore. So their ability to cope with all of these things up here is massively reduced. They haven't got any space left in their bucket to cope with these things. So these things then continue happening, and what happens is you get a bigger reaction and a bigger worry about it. So it directly pays straight into that bucket, which is already overflowing. So you can see how this is bad. It just causes this big circle and this awful cycle of things to happen, okay? And I don't know how many of you now are sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, that's me. Because as humans, we have buckets too. And it's really important that actually sometimes we take that as a lesson ourselves. And actually, if we find that we're in a place where we're not coping with things and things are more stressful than usual, I would advise that doing some dog training at that time, probably not the best time to be doing some dog training. For me, it's very important to be aware of my mental state when I'm trying to affect change in dogs as well. And actually, it's something that I talk about quite a lot. So if you want to know more, please get in touch. We do a lot of stuff around this, but this happens. Now, here's the other really sad thing that we need to take into account. I don't know if you remember, but earlier I said to you, adrenaline goes within a few minutes. Cortisol goes within a few days. So this bucket in our example filled up very quickly, and that was just one day's worth of examples. But actually, There's 2 days worth of stuff in here already, okay? So you can see how dogs that are particularly worried and particularly stressed in life, they're losing all the time. They're fighting to get this bucket empty, and it's very, very, very difficult. So I think we can all quite quickly agree that having an empty bucket is preferable to having a full bucket, okay? So the question then becomes, well, how? How do we get our dogs to have an empty bucket? Okay. Well, the first obvious thing is to knock all this off, isn't it? Yeah? Stop putting things in the bucket, and therefore the bucket won't fill up as quickly. Now, it's unreasonable to suggest that we can completely stop putting things in the bucket. That's not reality of life, is it? If our dogs are worried by things, they're going to continue to be worried by things. If they have a tummy problem, that's going to happen. You know, one day they're going to eat something that's going to give them a tummy problem. But we can certainly look at reducing this as much as possible. So, a very easy one. If your dog has a dodgy tummy, find a food that sits in there better, okay? Really easy fix and has an immediately huge impact. If your normal excitement, if your normal exercise for the day is ball slogger, then you can have an immediate fix and change by just changing the activity that you're doing with your dog. Sending them off to find the ball instead of running after it is going to reduce the amount of things that you're putting in the bucket here, okay? If you've got a stressed or worried dog, I'd like you to sit and make a list right now of everything that your dog finds difficult to cope with and difficult to be around, okay? And now have a look at that list and think, is there anything I can do about some of these? Because some of them we can do, and it just takes a little bit of thinking outside the box. So for example, Bob finds the traffic on our road incredibly difficult to cope with. We live on a dead-end road, and at the end of the road is a park. So you can imagine how busy it is. And we have cars going up it, we have car doors going quite a lot, and we have people walking past the window. And he finds that quite difficult. So when he's in the house with me, what we do is he comes up into the office in my spare room, and that's at the back of the house. I play music to cover the noises up, and he finds that a much easier place to be, to exist, to rest, because he simply can't hear those things. So for me, that's a really easy way to reduce the amount of stress that's happening to him during the course of the day. I simply just moved where he spent his day in the house, so he didn't have that exposure to that. If your dog is worried by other dogs, a really easy solution is to not go near the dogs. Now, that might be counterintuitive to start with, because we want our dogs to cope with things, but actually they can't cope. We can't teach them new behaviours. We can't teach them to be okay with dogs if they've got no coping left. We need them to have emptier buckets before we can teach them new things. So the first thing we need to do with our worried dogs is say, okay, I'm going to stop exposing you to these things that worry you. And then when we've got this bucket a little bit emptier and you see less reactions, you see less stress from your dog, then we can start doing some learning, okay? A lovely example I also like to give is of puppies. Puppies, because they're very small, have very small buckets, okay? And that's an interesting point. All dogs have different sized buckets, okay? So some dogs overflow very quickly, and some dogs have got great big whacking buckets in it that can take a lot of stress, and they don't really seem to do anything about it. They kind of shrug it off. Puppies naturally have small buckets because they are young and they haven't had a chance to evolve and learn lots of things. So they don't necessarily have lots of this, but they have lots of excitement, don't they? Everything in their life is new and exciting and wonderful, right? And what happens, instead of getting a stupid barking, lunging dog, you get lots of biting. So this is the main one that puppy parents struggle with. When puppies' buckets overflow, they turn into little land sharks, and it's a complete and utter nightmare to look after them. You get witching hour, and it's horrible. And generally, it's because their bucket is overflowing, okay? So, first thing we're doing is we're going to try and knock off this as much as possible, okay? The second thing we want to do is try and drain this bucket. Now, we know it drains because otherwise there wouldn't still stuff be in it. The stuff that would be in it would be 4 days old, 5 days old, 6 days old, however old your dog is, that it'd be in there permanently, wouldn't it? But it's not. It goes in there for 2 to 3 days, okay? So we want to see if we can empty that bucket. Anything that goes in, we want out as fast as we can do. You know, if it's in there between 2 and 3 days, I personally would like it in there 2, not 3. You know, if I've got a choice, I'm going to work on 2 rather than 3. Absolutely, it helps my dog better. So what can we do to help our dogs empty their buckets then? Really simply, the biggest, the best one that you can do is increase the amount of sleep your dog is getting. So, if I say to you, puppies, young puppies, anywhere under 6 months, need between 18 and 20 hours of sleep a day. 18 to 20 hours of sleep a day. That's a lot. And I have yet to meet a puppy parent, who said straight away, absolutely, they're getting that. Because puppies are inherently eager. They want to be awake. They want to be with you. They want to explore the world. But the problem with that is the more they're awake, the more the sympathetic nervous system is switched on, the more they're filling their tiny, tiny little buckets, and the more chance you've got of getting a stupid dog at the end of the day. Okay? Let sleeping puppies sleep. Very, very important. If you need to adapt your day to encourage your puppy to sleep more, this will have a huge impact on the amount of biting and silly behaviour that you're getting on an evening, okay? So we're looking for good periods of sleep overnight, and then during the course of the day, absolutely, they can come out of their crate or they can come off their bed, wherever it is that they are, and we go out for a play, we go out for a wander, we do a little bit of training, absolutely, of course we do, yes. But then they need to go back there and they need to be left and they need to go to sleep. We really, really need to be aiming for very, very decent sleep during the course of the day. It will have a huge, huge impact. Teenagers also need lots of sleep, so they need a good 18 hours of sleep a day. And at this point, we've kind of gotten over the fact that we've got to, and they feel like they've been in our family home for ages. And it's very easy to forget that we need to enforce certain rules with these guys because we just fall into a lovely pattern of being. But then also we do struggle with behaviours. So teenagers will struggle with their focus. They'll struggle with their ability to cope listening to us because they're teenagers. But if we can increase the amount of sleep that we're getting, then we have a very good impact on that as well. So teenagers, you want to be looking at a good 18 hours of sleep a day. You might need to revert back to using crates. That's absolutely fine. That's completely fine. So have a little think about what that looks like. Adult dogs then, they need somewhere between 16 and 18 hours of sleep a day. And again, we don't tend to be in the habit of making our adult dogs sleep. Now, personally for me, I know if Bob's not had enough sleep, he's a really clingy boy. He's just here. This is it. This is what he wants to do, mummy. He follows me everywhere. He wants to sit on me on the sofa. He's pawing at me for attention. And it's just, I mean, it sounds lovely, but it's not after a while. And you're a bit like, oh my gosh. So he has enforced sleep time. Now, he's an older kid. He doesn't need to be shut in his crate anymore because he can lay on a bed and stay on a bed. And that's something that he's able to do. So again, we have time in my office where I'm sat in front of the computer and I'm doing admin work, and there's a spare bed next to my desk, and I ask him to go onto the bed and he goes to sleep. He's not allowed off that bed while he's in sleeping mode. You know, if he gets up and gets off, I'll ask him to come back up because I know what he's going to do. He's going to potter around and go find a chew somewhere or go play with a teddy or something. And no, he needs to have some sleep. So I'll encourage him back up onto the bed, okay? And I make sure he gets some sleep there. For our nervous and reactive dogs, this is incredibly, incredibly important because what it's doing is it's draining this bucket, okay? When we're sleeping, we've turned our rest and relaxation system on and we're getting rid of all the cortisol that's in this bucket. Super important for all dogs at all life stages, making sure they're getting enough sleep to help empty this bucket, okay? The very next thing that we can do for the vast majority of dogs that's going to have a huge impact and be really cool and also give us as humans a little break from the dog because sometimes we can feel like we're having to constantly engage with them and constantly do stuff, and if we don't do stuff with them, they're destructive or they run around shouting or they're just annoying, so we feel like we have to be doing something, and that's just frustrating, isn't it? I want to increase the amount of dog time that our dogs are getting, okay? So what is dog time? Dog time is essentially time during the course of your dog's day where they're allowed to make their own decisions. They're allowed to do things that make them happy without me getting involved, without needing to think, what's the human want from me now? Our dogs, when they're awake, spend a lot of time trying to figure out what we're doing and what we want them to do. You know, is it that we want them to sit and give them a sit and a paw? Is it that we're going from room to room and, oh, where are you going? They're switched on, they're watching, they're paying attention to us all the time, and they're always thinking. And that's all right, but, you know, also doesn't help empty the bucket, especially if they're moving around the place. Some dogs, when they're left alone, become destructive, okay? Now, what's really interesting is a lot of behaviour that we find annoying, that we don't like, is our dog simply displaying behaviours that they enjoy. So dogs that like shredding things, perhaps they shred their teddy bears, or perhaps they shred your post when it comes through. Those dogs are telling you that they really enjoy shredding stuff. Now, yes, as a human, it's frustrating because we've gone out, we spent 15 quid on this great toy, and we come home proud as punch with it, and we give it, and then our dog shreds it. And it's demoralising, right? But dogs don't understand the concept of looking after their toys. They don't understand that we've put a lot of time, they don't even know what money is, do they? So, they don't know how much we've traded our time for that money to then buy them a toy with. They don't understand those concepts. They just know they had a great time de-stuffing it. It was brilliant fun, absolutely hilarious, okay? So those dogs, if my dog says to me, I like shredding stuff, I'd like you to find a way for them to shred stuff that they're allowed, okay? So if they like shredding teddies, go to Cancer Research, go to Oxfam, go to the Heart Foundation, go to all the charity shops and find teddies that are appropriate for them to de-stuff. We're not looking for the ones with the little balls in. We're going to try and avoid things with eyes that are sewn on and stuff that looks dangerous, of course, because we appreciate we're not buying bespoke dog toys now. But absolutely, a teddy or a dolly for 50p a pound, bring it home, let your dog go to town on it and let them shred it. Just give them it. All right, you're going to have to tidy up afterwards. Get over it. Do you know what I mean? It was a good 10, 15, 20 minutes that your dog was able to have some dog time without you being involved. Just let them have that moment in time to do stuff that makes them happy, okay? Those of us who've got sniffy dogs, we can hide things around our house and let them go sniffing for it. We can maybe look at how we deliver their food to them. So all our dogs are food orientated. Even if you don't think that they work for treats, your dog is 100% food orientated. And the reason I can tell you that is because they're still alive. They need to eat food to be alive. So there is an element of them enjoying their food, okay? So can we give them their food in a way that hits some of their other enjoyments so that they spend that time with their food rather than gobbling it down from a bowl? Maybe they enjoy the process of eating the food as well. So we can get all sorts of wonderful toys. All you need to do is bang on Amazon and go type in enrichment toys and you will find millions of games and toys that you can buy for your dog to do that. We sell loads in our online store as well. A really nice place to go. Licky mats, Kongs, the Kong wobbler, gyros. We've got the Trixie Activity snack ball, Trixie Do a Snake. Oh, there's so many things that you can buy that are great fun, that get your dog's brain going and don't involve us. They can go off and do their own thing. My favourite, I have to say, if we're kibble based, is the Trixie Activity snack ball because it's a rubber ball. It's like a ball. It's got a hole in the top that you put the kibble in and it's got shelves inside. So it's really hard when it rolls around, it catches on the shelves. I like this one best because it's a great morning toy because it's rubber. It doesn't bang on the skirting boards, and before I've had my coffee I can't deal with noise. So that's one of my favourites to do, okay? We can also get go slow bowls, so if our dogs are raw fed or wet food fed, we can put the food in go slow bowls or silicone mats with like wavy lines on them. The Trixie snake is good for those as well. You can stuff the food in the snake and it's a good challenge to get it out, okay? So we can be clever with the stuff that they're already getting. We can increase the amount of dog time that they're getting there. Now, I often get asked, how much dog time should my dog be having? And the answer is, do you know what? I can't give you an answer. It is different for each dog, but also it's different depending on what you like doing with them, how much time you've got to put into it as well. So for me, an increase in the amount of time your dog has to do dog stuff, that's all we're looking for here, okay? If we're hitting the sleep goals and we're giving them plenty of opportunity to have dog time, we're probably onto a winner in terms of emptying that bucket out, yeah? Okay, the last thing that we can look at then with this bucket is growing the size of it. So we can stop putting things in it, we can empty it out as fast as possible, and we can also try and grow the size of the bucket, okay? So, dogs that have got big buckets tend to be quite flexible in the way that they see things. Objects might not always mean the same thing. They don't get stuck in routines. They're able to do different things at different times. They're maybe able to be walked by different people. Dogs that have got big buckets tend to be quite confident dogs. They tend to be quite optimistic and they tend to be able to disengage from stuff quite easily. They don't tend to get fixated and stuck on things. They tend to be able to go, there's a thing, okay, and they carry on with their lives, okay? Now, these are all quite cool skills, but they're also quite difficult skills to gain. So what we're going to look at as we move through our course together is how can we increase those skills with our dogs as well, okay? So how can we increase their confidence? How can we increase their optimism? How can we increase their ability to look at a thing and disengage from that thing as well? And we're going to look at that a little bit more together rather than here in this particular session right now, okay? So that's our bucket. That's the collection of cortisol that's going in, the buildup of cortisol, the overflowing of it, and what we can do about it. We want to stop stuff going in and we want to drain that bucket as much as possible, okay? Your homework this week, here we go, your action points, the things that you can put in place right this minute to see changes straight away. You are going to look at this, print out, I advise you print out this thing, there's a link below, print this out for yourself and think about your dog in particular, okay? What things are adding into their bucket? What things can we stop adding into their bucket? What can we change for them to stop filling this bucket quite as much as we do, okay? I want you to really look at sleep. Okay, absolutely look at sleep. How can we make sure our puppy is getting 18 to 20 hours a day, our teenager is getting 16 hours a day, and our older adult dogs, they're getting 16 hours a day as well? How am I going to make sure that my dogs are getting enough sleep? What do I need to change to make sure this happens? Okay, really important. And last but not least, I want you to look at your dog's dog time. What does your dog enjoy doing that doesn't involve you? And help them do more of it. Have a look at some enrichment toys. Being around food, doing it at meal times is one of the best and the easiest times in our lives that we can do this. And it's a really, really great time to be involved. So that is your homework this week. Bob's come to say hi now. He said, I heard the word Kong. So I would love to hear how you are getting on with this. Get in touch with us. Send us some videos. Send us some pictures. Send us what you've been doing. Let us know if it's working. And I absolutely love sharing in those. Have a fantastic time this week. I really, really enjoy this.